All right, welcome everyone. I think we are on. Welcome to Rodale webinar series. I am Arianna Bozzolo and I'm the research director at the Rodale Institute California Organic Center at the Camarillo campus. In this presentation, I will talk about different aspects of hemp. I will touch topics like import, acreage, and uses. I'll give you some agronomic info, and I'll show you some of the results that we got from the research that has been done here at the McGrath farm. Before to start the presentation, I'll give you some housekeeping points. You can hear me, but I cannot hear you. So if I'm not audible, click on the audio setting on your screen. For all the problems, call Maria Pop, all the problems related to the webinar, of course. The number 610-683-1481. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question-answer section. Send me your question, please use the Q&A button and do not use the chat because I don't see it. This presentation is recorded and will be posted on our website in a week or so. And if you'll be able to see very many other, in the same sections, very many other webinars that are part of this series. To better focus on the presentation, I will turn my camera off and I will start the webinar. So I looked for this presentation, I looked for as much info that I could find relevant to the topic. I included in the slides the source of the info and the author of the article and the year when the research was done. Some of these research were done before 1970s, and some are more recent. So during this presentation, I will probably say something you already know, but I hope by the end of the presentation, you learn something new. So let's see the import of hemp products from USA before 2018. So the hemp industry has experienced significant growth since the Farm Bill passed into law in December 2018. Before that, US was a big importer. For decades, the federal law did not differentiate hemp from other cannabis plants. Just to be clear, hemp and cannabis, we call hemp and cannabis, but we commonly call hemp plant that has no THC and cannabis plants with THC. However, they come from the same family, Cannabaceae, like cucurbits, like zucchini and pumpkins are the same family, but different plants. Anyway, we will keep talking about plants that has no THC, calling them hemp. So cannabis of any kind was made illegal and hemp was classified as a Schedule I controlled substance according to the Controlled Substance Act of 1970. There was no large-scale industrial production in the US, and the US market was mainly dependent on imports of both finished products and ingredients. In 2017, imports to the United States consisted in a total $63.3 million, as you can see in the table. Even if the imports have declined from 2015, US imports have steadily increased since 2005. In 2017, about 2/3, 64% of all of the value of all US imports were hemp seeds, and other products such as hemp oil or seed cake accounted for about 28% of the total value. Import hemp yarn and fibers reported for about 8% in 2017, but there is no data, I couldn't find any data on available finished products. Canada is the single largest supplier of US hemp imports that account about 90%. Actually, I thought it was China, but China imports about 5% of the annual needs. And Romania has its share of 4% of import. In 2018, finally, the Farm Bill declassified hemp from the list of controlled substances and legalized the production of hemp as an agricultural commodity. I couldn't find any info for 2021, but seems that US farmers are planting less hemp than they did in 2019 and 2020, mainly due to regulatory uncertainty, but also a surplus of hemp flower and biomass coming from the 2019 big harvest that is still causing a wholesale price drop. So licensed total hemp acreage for 2020 production reached almost 466,000 acres in 47 states. In 2020, we had 9% decrease compared to a year before. That in 2019 was almost quadruple the number of acres licensed in 2018. Ventura County, where the Rodale Institute is located, I think it represents well the trend of the nation. In this table comes from the Ventura County year report. And in 2019, we had almost 3,500 acres of hemp that include biomass, seeds, and flowers. In 2020, the acreage dropped at 584. Hemp is a multi-purpose crop. Of course, hemp can be grown for fiber, seed oil, food, medicinal property. But I put in this slide what I think some of the most curious products that has been made of hemp. The Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. Henry Ford built a car that was completely made of flax, wheat, hemp, so vegetable products. A surfboard with biocomposite is possible to build pretty much everything. And before Prohibition, hemp was a good source of income for growers, not only in US mainly Virginia and Georgia, but also other states like Italy. Let's see some of the most common and maybe less common uses of hemp. Hemp fiber is used for textile clothing, for biocomposite for car, paper, building material. Hempcrete is becoming more and more popular. Animal bedding, and it has also potential as a biofuel crop too. Fiber derived from hemp is one of the strongest and durable forms of natural fiber. And recently, hemp has been rediscovered as a sustainable, high-yielding industrial fiber that can meet the global demand for fiber. So hemp consists in two types of fibers: long outer fibers that we call bast, and the inner short fibers called hurd. For 1,000 years, hemp was grown for bast fibers, while the hurd was a waste byproduct. Bast fiber can account for only, unfortunately, 23% of the stock, while the hurd fibers make up for 80% of the stock. During the transformation process, we try to remove and separate fibers from non-fibers, and we do that with microbial, chemical, and mechanical technology. However, each type of fiber has its own use in the industry. The bast are generally used for clothing and paper, while the hurd is used more for livestock bedding and other construction application. There are fibers that are produced by dual purpose varieties. but it is believed that to be lower quality than that produced by traditional fiber varieties. However, the economic benefits of using the whole plant, so including fiber and, for example, seed production, may outweigh the quality factor. For at least 3,000 years, hemp seed has been used for both human and animals as a food ingredients or for livestock feed. Hemp seed oil was also used for as a lightning oil or to make soap and paints. I forgot to put some number here, but the seeds contain approximately 30% of protein that includes 8 of our essential amino acids recommended for human, 25% starch and 30% oil. So 30% protein, 25% starch and 30% oil. Hemp oil seed is rich in omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acid and is considered very healthy for human. It will reduce our cholesterol and our blood pressure if needed. Hemp seed oil contains also antioxidants. In this slide, I listed the processing phases of seeds. Seeds can be hulled when we remove the outer shell, and then we can be milled. When it's milled, we can make flour and also protein powder. So we have the oil production, and from the oil production, we have the seed cake that can be sieved to obtain flour that has high fiber and low protein, and protein powder, high protein and low fiber. So flour can be used for baking, and it seems can substitute 25% of wheat flour. Honestly, I tried it with my pizza dough and lose a little bit on the elasticity. That is pretty important for the pizza, but the flavor wasn't bad at all. Hemp grown for CBD. So if you are like most Americans, 3 years ago, you'd never heard about CBD, but now we are looking and seeing it everywhere, lotions and oil, and many other medical products. Here I put a little bit of history of CBD. So cannabis has been around for a very long time, and it's been used as a medicinal form since as far back as 2700 before Christ. Roger Adam was able to isolate CBD compound in 1937, although at that time he didn't know really exactly what he found. In 1964, an Israeli scientist had a breakthrough. He not only separated the CBD compounds from the rest, but they also defined the structure and the chemical composition. He did the same, he and his team did the same with the THC, the psychoactive compound. So this allowed them to analyze both compounds side by side and study their differences. Another big push for the history of CBD happened when the Americans, Howlett and Devine, realized that they discovered the cannabinoid receptor in human body, and they thought, they realized that if the body has receptors for cannabinoids, then it must also naturally produce them. The discovery was exciting, but there was still the social stigma that slowed down the progress. However, in mid-2000, the story of Charlotte Figi, the Colorado baby with Dravet syndrome, was followed by the whole nation. And it gave a face to millions that could benefit from cannabis. The parents of the child tried the conventional medicine, but with no success until they moved to Colorado and they found a grower that could grow for them hemp plants with low THC and high CBD. They produce oil, they give it to the child, and she quickly healed. Not completely, but she did make big progresses. Eventually, a British pharmaceutical company did put on the market some highly purified CBD drugs. And that helped the diffusion of the CBD product and to increase awareness of the effect. So going back to the agronomical aspects, one of the most crucial for us that grow hemp is the THC level in CBD plants. So many factors other than genetics can impact the THC level. One study found made in Europe, they reported a higher THC content correlated to soil temperature. This made me wonder if the plastic mulch can have an impact on THC level. This tells us that we need more research on the topic, definitely. Another less common use of hemp is fresh use. Cornell pioneered in the research regarding hemp for salad and fresh use. They tested several varieties and several seed densities. They also worked on the seed size. They grew hemp in trays in greenhouse, and the results from the study showed that the recommended seed rate for salad, fresh consumption, is 2.3, in between 2.3 and 2.8 seeds per centimeter. Although there was a slight yield benefits with the 2.8 ratio. They harvested about in between 13 and 18 days after sowing. And what it was curious about this experiment was the final aspect that included a consumer attitude analysis. So they hired 14 panelists, and to these panelists were given samples from 6 baby leaf species. So hemp, kale, lettuce, romaine lettuce, butter lettuce, spinach, and arugula. And they were asked to describe the taste, texture, aftertaste, and appearance. And baby leaf hemp was found to have a relatively mild taste with unique fruity and floral flavors and the fuzzy texture. So the texture of the baby leaf hemp was found different from the other leafy greens. So that and this unique flavor profile makes it a good addition to salad blends. In the picture, we see hemp grown for salad in open field. Here at the Rodent Institute, California, we did a research with 2 varieties and 2 seeding rate. Results are not ready yet, but I could see that some varieties are more indicated, more prone for direct consumption, for taste, and for growing behavior. And they also responded better to the stress of the cat, allowing a second harvest after a few days following the first one. So having 2 cats from the same seed could be a great tool for the growers for fresh market. In the next few slides, I'll focus on the environmental benefits of hemp. Hemp is not only a versatile plant because of the many uses, but is also a crop with environmental benefits and a potentially profitable crop that it can fit into a sustainable farming system. So one of the environmental benefits that is the phytoremediation. Hemp is also called mop crop. Hemp has been recognized as one of the plants that can be used for land renovation because of its intense growth of the high-yielding fiber variety mostly. Hemp has been shown to have potential to remediate land polluted by heavy metals like lead, nickel, cadmium. The hemp when we grow hemp for fiber, they're generally tall, and the roots grow deep into the soil. It can reach about 45, 90 centimeter. That is 3 feet, a little bit more than 3 feet. And this enable the plant's root to penetrate deep and increase the efficiency of removing the contamination compared to other plants that has more shallow rooting system. Researchers found that the highest concentration of heavy metal accumulation were in leaves, although they were distributed in every part of the plant, but in less concentration. Back in 1986, hemp was planted to help the contaminate around the soil around the site where Chernobyl nuclear disaster occurred. I'd like to make a parenthesis here. Sometimes growers do not want uptake heavy metals from the soil because we know how strict the controls are for heavy metal contents on CBD or resveratrol product or other product, edibles and so on. So over the past few decades, heavy metal contamination in soil and water has increased because of the anthropogenic activities. With this experiment, this pilot experiment, we wanted to evaluate the effect of silicon dioxide fertilizer and the impact on the phytoremediation ability of hemp. So we carried on a pilot experiment in open field with CBD plants. In the table below is reported cadmium content detected in the soil, in the roots, and in the inflorescences, in the flowers, the buds. So cadmium soil content was different in the 4 areas where the experiment was carried on, 0.4, 0.6, but we can look at the average. Starting with 0.5 microgram in the soil, after silica fertilization, I found in roots 0.4 and 0.3 for control and fertilized sample, respectively. In the buds, inflorescence, in the inflorescence, I found 0.1 and 0.2 in the treated in the control and in the treated plants, respectively. So I calculated that in the control, about 70% of the cadmium that was in the soil was absorbed by the plant. I hope it was not confusing, but so I concluded based on these numbers that control hemp plants did not receive the silicon dioxide fertilization showed higher uptake of cadmium compared to the fertilized plants. However, data show that when the cadmium has been introduced in the vascular system of the plant, the control treatment retained cadmium in the roots as opposite as the plants that were fertilized that translocated the heavy metal in higher amount to the flowers. So unfortunately, I didn't have enough funding to send all the samples, so I couldn't run statistics on these experiments. So that's why statistics is so important. I don't know if it's true. This is mostly speculation. Other researchers found that silica fertilizer do immobilize heavy metal in the soil. But their experiments were done in pots in the greenhouse in a controlled environment. While the open field is a little bit different, there is more factors that influence the results. And the soil, fortunately and unfortunately, is a great buffer. Another environmental benefit of hemp is carbon sequestration. If we Google it, we can find that 1 hectare of industrial hemp can absorb 1622 tons of CO2 per hectare. And when it's possible to grow 2 crops per year, the absorption is double. So the rapid growth of hemp that it can grow up to 12 feet in 100 days make it one of the fastest CO2 to biomass conversion tool available, better than the agroforestry. But how do we get those numbers from? I added these slides because I want to point out that carbon sequestration is not an abstract concept, it's mathematics. Biomass is produced by photosynthetic conversion of carbon to the atmospheric carbon to the plant. So British researcher calculated the carbon sequester for 1 ton of fiber hemp in UK. So the carbon uptake estimates were calculated by examining the carbon content of the molecules that make up the fibers of the hemp stem. So the hemp stem consists primarily of cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. And all of these have a carbon in their chemical structure. Cellulose is about 70% of the stem dry weight, and cellulose accounts for 45% of carbon in its molecular mass. Hemicellulose is about 22% of the stem dry weight, and its carbon content is 48%. And lignin is about 6% of the dry weight of the stem, with 40% of carbon content. These numbers are on the green square. So to summarize, 1 ton of harvested stem contains 0.7 ton of cellulose, 0.22 ton of hemicellulose, and 0.6 ton of lignin. You can go through the number later if it's going too quick. It follows that every ton of industrial hemp stem contains 0.445 ton of carbon absorbed from the atmosphere, 44% of stem dry weight. When we convert the carbon to CO2, and according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 12 ton of carbon equals 44 ton of CO2. That represent 1.63 ton of CO2 absorbed per ton of hemp. On land use basis, if we use an average of yield in between 5.5 and 8, it represents 8.9 to 13.4 ton of CO2 absorbed per acre. The roots and the leaf mulch that are not included in the fibrous material are left in situ, and there are approximately 20% of the mass harvested. The resulting carbon content absorbed and will remain in the soil will be about 0.084 tons. So the yield estimates that is 5.58 ton per acre. That represent that about 0.5 ton of carbon per acre that is absorbed but left in situ after hemp cultivation. That represent 1.6 to 2.4 ton per acre of CO2 absorbed but left in situ after hemp cultivation. So the final figures, after we calculate 16% of moisture, so the atmospheric dry weight, we have CO2 absorbed for ton of hemp stem is 1.3 ton. Per acre is in between 7 and 11 ton. And for root and leaf, we are in the range between 1.4 to 2. And this is a calculation made in UK. I hope was clear. Another use for hemp is bioenergy, biomass and bioenergy. Hemp has been recognized as one of the energy plants due to the higher biomass and the energy concentration per hectare. If we count for weed suppression ability, low pesticide requirements, and soil health improvement properties, hemp becomes even more energy efficient compared to other crops. So fuel properties of hemp are either similar or superior to other biofuels, such as cereal straw or wood. For example, the heat combustion of hemp is about 90 megajoule, is comparable to zeamite, is the corn, slightly higher than Jerusalem artichokes, and slightly less than miscanthus. In the picture, I put that miscanthus because maybe we are not all familiar with that. Additionally, both wet and ensiled hemp biomass can be transformed into biogas and ethanol. When burned, hemp also emits comparatively low sulfur compounds and has low ash content. So hemp has good potential to contribute toward renewable energy, So among the environmental benefits of growing hemp, I need to mention soil health. So hemp agronomic management practice can improve soil health. When we use hemp in a rotation, we interrupt pest cycle, we maintain and enhance soil health and crop diversification. So hemp grown for fiber can produce large quantities of root biomass that can be distributed deeper in the soil as compared to a corn or wheat. So the roots are deeper. Fiber hemp is also, since it's a deep-rooted, can influence soil structure. Taproot penetrates deep into the ground and aerated the soil, and it builds aggregates and also prevents erosion. A group of researchers evaluated hemp grown in monoculture and in rotation with wheat. Hemp increased wheat yield in 2 of the 3 seasons, and the researchers concluded that hemp had great potential as a predecessor for wheat under rain-fed Mediterranean condition in this case. Another study reported a 10-20% increase of yield in yield of the wheat, followed by cultivation of hemp. More recent research where soybean was grown in monoculture demonstrated that hemp cultivated earlier had a positive effect on soybean growth. And some reports also suggested that growing hemp following alfalfa can improve yield. Another great characteristic of hemp that is very competitive with weeds. Hemp for fiber, because of its high density plant, can rapidly cover the soil surface, and since it grows fast right after emergence, it makes it even more competitive. Compare, for example, cotton. These characteristics make it potentially one of the greatest economic and environmental benefits of cultivating hemp in rotation with other crops. An experimental study also demonstrated hemp was able to suppress weeds efficiently without the use of any herbicides, but the seed density needed to be, except for places where the seed density was relatively low, was about in between 10 and 30 plants per square meter. Hemp also nematicide and fungicide properties. Hemp plant has been reported to decrease population of nematodes. A greenhouse experiment, 3 soil pathogens were suppressed by hemp. Fungus, nematode, and the hafla were suppressed by hemp, and it was concluded that introducing hemp in the crop rotation may improve soil health. However, if we want to successfully include hemp in the rotation, we need some more research focused on the optimal sequencing, because as we saw, most of the studies are related to corn, wheat, soybean, but I didn't find any information about specialty crops, for example. We need to look into the effect on pest and disease of hemp in a crop rotation, and also the effect it can have on soil health. Here's some info on growing condition for hemp cultivation. Hemp can be grown on several soil types, but best is on loose, well-drained, loam soil that are rich in organic matter. Same for pH. Hemp can grow in a wide range of soil pH, but ideal is in between 5.8 and 6, and it doesn't grow well in acidic soil. The soil should be deep, well aerated, rich of nutrients, and definitely have a good water holding capacity. Hemp is drought resistant when is after germination, but if we want a good yield, drought stress they won't help. The presence of compacted layer can restrain the root development, it can force the roots to take an L shape that negatively affect the uptake of nutrients. So the soil needs to be well worked. Hemp is a short day plant and very sensitive to the photoperiod. The day length has been reported to strongly influence the productivity of different hemp varieties. The shift from the vegetative to flowering stage in hemp is dependent on day length and variety. However, some varieties initiate flowering regardless of the day length, while others actually require shorter days to transition to flower stage. Data on the specific number of lights required per day are limited, and definitely the topic requires further exploration. Plant spacing. I have difficulties finding some conclusive numbers for the ideal plant spacing. Plant spacing in hemp is dependent on the type of hemp cultivated. Generally, hemp planted at high densities encourages taller height and restricts flowering, even though the genetics definitely prevails. And also high density impact the quality of the fibers. On the contrary, hemp planted for seed and CBD needs to be well spaced to maximize flowering in branches. So there is a significant variation of seed density for fiber, and recommendation range from 50 to 75 plants per square meter, so it's very variety dependent. In case of hemp for CBD, the highest yield that was obtained at a plant density of 15 plants per square meter. And in the same experiment, the author suggested that the highest hemp oil production from seeds variety would require similar planting density. One of the studies reported row spacing similar for CBD and seeds, with the optimal density between 30 and 75. And another study reported the optimal density for CBD to be 10 plants per square meter. So results from these studies indicated optimum hemp spacing is a function of the type of hemp variety grown and the soil environmental condition. However, it's clear that information about spacing for optimal CBD and seeds production is very limited and needs to be addressed. When we grow hemp for CBD, pruning can be an essential tool to increase our yield and to control the way our plant grows. Apical dominance is the phenomenon where the central stem of the plant is dominant over the laterals. Apical dominance occurs when the shoot apex inhibits the growth of the laterals, the other lateral buds, and so the plants can grow vertically. It is important for the plants to put the energy growing upwards so it can intercept more light for photosynthesis. At the same time, it can outcompete the neighbor's plant. So typically the end of a shoot contains an apical bud, which is the location for where the shoot growth occur. And the apical buds produce a hormone, auxin, that inhibits growth of the laterals. Auxin was discovered in 1937 and is the hormone that regulates the apical dominance. Auxin is transported via phloem, and it diffuses into the lateral buds and prevents their elongation. So when the bud is removed, the auxin level is lowered, and the concentration, and this allows the laterals to grow and produce new shoots. So to evaluate the effect of an apical pruning practice on hemp growth, development, and production on 3 varieties, we set up an experiment here at the Rodin Institute in Camarillo. Camarillo is located in Southern California. We are a few miles from the ocean on the very fertile land of the Oxnard plant. We are in a coastal area, and it never gets hot, it never gets cold. The air temperature during the growing season are in the upper 70s, and the lower are in the 50, 55. Never freeze, never rain. It rained a little bit sometime. According to the Web Soil Survey, the area where the experiment was carried on is a Pacheco silty clay loam, where the square is, little square is. And here is the map of the field. Each cell of the map represents a plant. We collected data on phenology, plant height, number of nodes, and biomass of harvest. Plant height and the number of nodes on the main stem usually serves as traits that that really affect hemp yield. So we use the split plot design with 4 replicas, 3 varieties, first frost, cherry soda, and grape soda. These are the characteristics listed on the website. The seeds were donated by Ventura Seed Company. They're all feminized. They differ mostly for maturation time. The rest of the characteristics are similar. Good botrytis resistance, there are hybrids, and they are low THC content. We collected the phenological stages based on the growing degree days. In this table on the left, you'll see the BBCH scale that was actually developed for fiber that tracks phenology stages of development. Each column represents 50 days accumulated degree days. The name of each variety was placed in the right cell based on the combination of date and development stage. From this table, we could calculate the degree days needed from transplant to harvest for each variety. And we could find that first frost, the variety first frost, needed almost 1800 degree from transplant to harvest, grape soda 1942, and cherry soda 1942 plus, because when we terminated, when we harvested, it was still growing, but we needed to end the experiment. So first frost was an early harvest variety with only 84 days from transplant to harvest. Grape soda needed 98 days from transplant to harvest, and cherry soda is a late harvest with 100+ days from transplant to harvest with a steady growth rate. We noticed that first frost and grape soda had an exponential growth during the month of August when we had the warmer week of the growing period. Cherry soda did not respond to the increased heat at the same way, but it kept a steady and consistent growth. In this graph, we can see the number of nodes and the height. Analyze the data by varieties, regardless from the treatment. We can see the results based on the variety. Higher plants from grape soda that reached 52 inches with 23 nodes, but the average at harvest was 40 inches and 20 nodes. For first frost, the blue one, first frost had the taller plants at transplant, but low number of nodes. Longer internodes led to a lower biomass production. And grape soda, the red bar, was harvested at 100% stem elongation, while cherry soda could increase his height. So when I analyzed the data based on the treatment, there was no difference in number of nodes or height right after pruning, but more nodes on the control plants was found at harvest. Here I averaged all the varieties together. So at this point, I wanted to know how the different varieties respond to the stress of a cat. So how quick the plant respond to the cat, and does topping slow down growth? Here I analyzed the data based on variety and treatment. And first frost, topping influenced the height by reducing it, C, A, and B on the right of the green arrow that correspond to the time of the cat. The recovery was slower since the height are different for 2 days after the cat. For cherry soda, topping reduced number of nodes in the treated plants, but the impact of height is not significant until 15 days after cutting. And grape soda reduced the number of nodes in treated plants, but did not impact height. The cat did not slow down the growth, so grape soda plants has less nodes but the same height, so longer internodes. At a harvest, for first frost, we divided healthy, marketable inflorescence and non-marketable and total. Also below and above biomass was measured, so root and shoots. There was high variability on the marketable and unmarketable products. From the bottom graph, we can see there are significant differences between treatment with higher biomass, about 19% more, and bigger roots when plants were topped. For grape soda and cherry soda, we did not separate flowers, but we measured the total biomass. It's very time-consuming to separate and cut the marketable and non-marketable buds. So while no differences were significant for root weight, big differences were found on the above ground biomass. So grape soda had about 34% more biomass in the plants that were topped, where the apical meristem was removed. About 100 grams, 1 kilo per plant for the control and almost 1.5 kilo per top plant. That if the calculation is correct, I will have about 110 acres for the on top for the control plants and 1.5 for the treated plants. Cherry soda has a similar result with a 34.8 more total biomass in the top plants, and we go with 1,100 grams in the kilo, a little bit more a kilo per plant, dry weight. That it means 1.910 per acre, while the treated plants we are at about 1.7 kilos. That correspond to almost 3 tons per acre of dry weight. So in conclusion, I could see that in general, all the variety we used responded positively to the meristem removal. Topping did not decrease plant height and number of nodes at harvest for all the varieties. For first frost, topping increased biomass production and can increase yield. There was few significant differences, no differences between treatments in terms of harvest index. I did the calculation, harvested inflorescences on above ground biomass, but there was a good correlation, about 0.8 between harvest index and harvested inflorescence. Also, first frost was a smaller variety, lower height and number of nodes compared to the others. Grape soda variety had higher plants and number of nodes, and cherry soda is considered the best performance with a higher crop load. A few more slides that I want to show you. You're still in time. There's some more aspects to evaluate about topping. Evaluate breakage because of wind. Topping might help this aspect. Here in Camarillo, we reached about 35 miles per hour wind, and that caused a breakage of many plants. Maybe a shorter plant has less chance to break. Some of the branches broke probably because of the weight of the flowers. So maybe the topping timing can influence this aspect. And harvest logistics, sometimes to have a smaller plant is easier because they're easier to handle, to transport, since the harvest is all handmade. One more thing about pest and disease. I didn't have many. I really saw a little bit of powdery mildew. We had some, we always talk about in here about earworm, caterpillar, and armyworm caterpillar, but especially this year, I had an important population of salt marsh caterpillars. Last year, the population was under control because of predator wasp that I honestly wasn't able to identify, that are the one in the jar. This year, the population was more relevant than last year. I still found parasitized caterpillar, but the damage on hemp were significant. And last slide that I want to show you is about girdling. Almost all my plants from the nursery had this behavior because probably the late transplant and let them in the trays for too long. Plants should not girdle. In the picture in the bottom right, you see the ideal growth right before transplant, because when they girdle, they basically choke themselves. The uptake of nutrients is not ideal. And this is my last slide, and I'm open for questions. If you want to send, if we won't be able to answer your question, you can send all your questions at my address. You see here at the bottom right of the screen. All right, the first question is about the topping. So the question is when the cut needs to be done. In this case, we top the plants right before flowering in August, only one time. And we saw a positive response to even if it was a little late, a positive response to this type of pruning. However, it's possible to do it earlier. We saw for some varieties when we work on the hemp for salad that even if we top the plants very early, the plants would respond quickly and positively. The next question is, can you talk more about the effectiveness of using hemp in building material and those materials' ability to sequester carbon? What I know about the building materials, I know that I never worked with that, and I know they are fireproof. They will burn, but they don't catch fire. So it can be used in this area in California where fires are an issue. The ability to sequester carbon, I think, is we can look at what we saw for the UK experiment. Since the hemp crate is made of the byproduct from the fiber hemp. I hope I answered the question. Another question is, did you study CBD concentration in top plants compared to on top? No, and I didn't even do the THC content. Definitely would be interesting to see if there is any difference on after the treatment. But as you probably know, the cost of those type of analyses is pretty high. So we did the basic biomass